Use your powers for evil,
Your evil is mine.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Next Stop Everywhere, the podcast all about the coolest of the Time Lords, Doctor Who. With me today, not only is my favorite podcast partner to talk about Doctor Who, Charles.
Hello.
But we have, in a special drinking game version of the podcast, the often mentioned, but so far never heard, Ken, who is the other person responsible for me finding the Doctor.
You mean it wasn't Bruce Springsteen?
No, it wasn't. It was Ken. Hey, Ken, how you doing?
Hey, Jesse. I'm doing great, thanks.
We are... Go ahead, Charles. I'm sorry.
I was just going to say hi, Ken, and welcome to Next Stop Everywhere.
Thank you, Charles.
Our wonderful studio facilities. I hope you enjoy it.
Yeah, exactly.
High tech.
This is fancy.
Only the best for you.
This is just like how I would design it. Oh,
Exactly.
wait, it's my room.
Yes. So, as many of you guys have heard, Ken and I have been longtime friends. Started as co-workers, became very wonderful friends, and his lovely bride is the one who gave me all the crocheted, the doctors that we've posted. In fact, we have number 2 today, keeping us company. But Ken, just in case someone is new to the podcast, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into Doctor Who?
Well, back in the dark ages of man, when dinosaurs ruled the earth, I was in college in a little liberal arts college in just south of Lexington, Kentucky, and there was a black and white television in the lobby. And in 1977, like I said, back when dinosaurs ruled the earth, I walked into the lobby, and there was this television show with this guy with this really long scarf fighting this giant robot. And even in 1977, I thought, well, that's kind of cool. And it was the local independent TV station, because they didn't have PBS stations or cable channels back then. And they were showing the shows in the original BBC episodic format. And so every day at 4:00, when the classes were over, we were in the lobby watching in black and white, even though the episodes were in color, but the television was not. That's how crappy of a college this was. And watched Doctor Who. And I've been a fan all along since then. I watched what I could when I was in the Navy on submarines after that, and all the way through. And I tried to infect Jesse, and he fought against it and said, no, that's just stupid. And finally...
I broke him.
No, I actually think that Captain Jack broke him. It was Torchwood that did it. The Dark... Who had thought that Jesse would be converted by the Dark Show?
Yeah, because I've been working on him for years too, and finally got you.
Yeah, because you're the first person I followed, Charles, after I first got on Twitter from following Jesse, because Jesse followed you, and I didn't know anybody on Twitter or anything. But you had some.
Yeah, you're one of my early.
Right. Yeah, I'm a really early follower on the Twitter and on the with those other crazy kids on the Google Plus. So there you go.
See, there you go. All right, he's got the link.
Me, I think, is all it's on.
He's got the link down.
That's it.
Yeah.
See, we're calling it the Twitter. So just to drive Jesse nuts.
It really is funny, because this is in a lot of ways full circle, because when I did, and I've told the story before where someone talked about Captain Jack was really Malcolm Reynolds, and I went to Ken and I said, hey, can you give me some of this Torchwood? And he gave me copies, and then I said, well, I really like this. Can I see some Doctor? And he gave me...
That's a small part of the DVD collection.
Yeah,
nice.
Yeah.
Very nice.
just a small part.
And so...
Here's a small part of the comic book collection. So
that's really nice. But then I figured you had something really massive like that.
Yeah.
So just a bit.
And so both of these wonderful friends have been my go-to resources of, if I have a question about the Doctor, classic, and opinions. And I will tell you, the early stages of this podcast really was Ken and I going to lunch once a week and talking about, the Doctor. And I one of the things that we just have loved is the magic of the show and how you kind of learn everything. So we are glad. And so this is the first of a series of shows where we've asked different friends of the show, fans of the show, people we know and other podcasting to join on and talk about an episode. And Ken, being Ken, said, hey, you know what would be really good? We should talk the war games. And I'm like, sure, I don't care. And Charles goes,
Well, wasn't it supposed to be originally the invasion?
No, then, he picked the war games to begin with. Well, we misunderstood. So
okay.
So Charles had already started watching the invasion, and I said, "Oh no." So for those of you who don't know, the War Games is the second Doctor, Patrick Troughton. It is the final episode of his tenure as a Time Lord, and it is the longest. Is it officially the longest Doctor?
I think it's the longest extant because I think that the one Dalek episode may have been longer, but it's lost.
Well, yeah, it's the longest that exists. Ken's right. The Dalek invasion the Daleks' master plan, which was William Hartnell's story. I'm actually listening to that on audio right now, but the that story sadly does not entirely exist. There's only like 3 episodes that currently have been located, but it exists entirely in audio. But that one was 12 episodes. Yeah. So as long as this one, the War Games is, that's another 45 minutes.
Another 45 minutes.
Yeah. On top of that. So, yeah.
So just to tell you how long it is, I started. I like to watch it fairly soon, so I started yesterday morning and got through the first disc, and then I did the second disc this morning. And I was like, "Oh, there'll be extras in the second disc." No, it's just 2 discs.
I didn't make it. There's a third disc of extra.
Okay, that's special features.
Yeah, that's the special feature.
Yeah, it works pretty good if you split it up into 5 and 5.
Yeah, it does. So, So anyway, let's start out with overall impressions. I'll start. I have said this many times, and I think it bears repeating. You have to develop a taste for the Doctor. I don't think with the modern era you do. I think because our minds are wired that way that you can randomly watch a current era Doctor Who and kind of pick up enough that you like it. But the classic the pacing is so different. Some in black and white, some in color. It's just different that if you don't have a mindset, you don't enjoy it. And so one of the things that Charles has done a really good job in this, kind of hiatus is picked different episodes for us to watch. And so I just loved this story. I even loved the length. And we're going to talk a little more specific about it, but there is a charm to, there's a history about why it went to 10, the whole idea of the different actors and how, we'll get more specifics, but I just really loved this episode. Ken?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, let Ken go ahead. Let him chime in. He's our special guest.
Yeah. Oh, thanks. So, as nobody knows but Jesse, and maybe Charles has heard about it, my youngest son, Parker, who is 17, and I are watching all of the Doctor Who's in order. We started with The Unearthly Child and are just working our way through. Last night, and we do it every Saturday night. Actually, we watch one episode of Daredevil, and once next week when we watch the final episode of that, then after that we'll start on Sense8, and then we watch an episode of Doctor Who. And like last night we watched The Ambassadors of Death.
Yes. John Pertwee classic.
Yeah, and it was
awesome. I love that story.
It is an awesome, and even more than this one, its story has an amazing, the fact that it was written 5 times and finally they gave up. And Terrence Dix comes in and goes, look, I'm just going to fix it. Just pay the guy. He goes on. But this story, I think more than any that we've seen so far, is so chock full of revelations and new things we see about the Doctor and explanations of stuff, and is referenced in so many future episodes that we've seen, clear up to Neil Gaiman's The Doctor's Wife, where we see the little boxes, the psychic messages again, for only, I think, the second time in all of them, because the Doctor makes one of those in this thing, and then all that way. So it's really fundamentally important, and it's a good story. But yeah, pacing, you got to get used to 1960s television. And the good news is, Jesse, is that I think we're through the ones that are really bad. Certainly the Ambassadors of Death was a much more modernly paced story. And I think as you progress through the Pertwees and into Bakers and stuff, it gets better. We leave the 60s, 20 minutes to tell you one little element of the show.
Very nice. Charles?
Like this is obviously this is a big story. Just running it down, you've got the Doctor regenerating, you've got the introduction of the sonic screwdriver, you've got the Time Lords, the first appearance of the Time Lords, actually the first appearance of Gallifrey, although the show or the planet isn't actually named until the Time Warrior back in, I believe, 1974. So it's a while before the planet's actually named, but this is the first appearance of it. You get the second Doctor saying goodbye to Jamie and Zoe. So this is their last story. This is the last black and white story. So it's from this point on, it's in color, glorious color. And it's there's this, it's obviously this was Doctor Who in a moment of change. Literally and thematically, and that's one of the reasons I think it's a great piece, and it's a nice little send off for Patrick Troughton.
I did not know this was the first time they did the sonic screwdriver, because at first all it does is it actually does screwdriver.
It's a screwdriver.
It's sonic.
Which was kind of funny. And we talked about this when we did Spearhead from Space, right? I didn't, right? That's the
the first.
That's the next episode.
Yes.
Which we've already covered in a timey-wimey kind of way.
Yes, we have.
That's right. See previous episode.
Yeah. When they were doing the 50th anniversary and they were doing all the little 30-minute specials on BBC America, they talked about the beauty of that third Doctor and how they kind of reboot the series altogether. They said it on Earth. It was in color. He, couldn't go in the TARDIS. You had a new Doctor. But I had no idea the significance that was happening in this one. And so really, really cool stuff. Now, this is the first time I've seen these two companions. So I'd really like Ken and then you, Charles, talk to me about your thoughts on these. Good companions, bad companions. Give me your feelings.
I like both of them, and I think they're both pretty quintessential companions. Zoe is smart and from the future, and so she hangs with the Doctor much better. Jamie is action-oriented, just like the teacher,
Ian Chesterton.
Ian, just like Ian was before. He's the man of action, because the Doctor really isn't. In the future, the Doctor will take that role more, but in these early days, the Doctor is not very physical, and so there needs to be somebody to do that, and Jamie, of course, being the wild Scotsman that he is, was great at that. I love both of these companions, and think that you can see aspects of them in modern companions all the way up.
I totally agree with that. As far as I'm concerned, Jamie and Zoe are probably my favorite of the companion arrangements. I think Patrick Troughton's Doctor, the second Doctor, with these two companions complement each other very, very well. Like Ken said, you've got the Doctor being the brains, Jamie's the brawn, and Zoe is the even bigger brain, because in a rare moment of Doctor Who companions, especially female companions. You have a companion in Zoe who is actually smarter than the Doctor.
Yeah, I think only Romano comes close in that regard to picking up the technology and being aware of going on. In the one episode with the Croughtons, she takes the test and like blows it away, and better than he did. He has to go, well, wait, I'll take it again.
Exactly.
I'll make it. So yeah, it's just a shame. It's just a crying shame that there are so few Troughton episodes in existence still, that so few of them are left. There's just almost a whole season is missing, and it's just a crying shame, because he's a great Doctor and his companions are really good, and I would love to see some of those episodes.
Yeah, thankfully most of Troughton's final season is intact. Apart from really the Space Pirates, which was a bad story anyway.
Was it bad?
So it's I've listened to it on audio. It's not a great story.
Okay.
So, but that's the story that precedes the War Games. But with the Dominators, the Mind Robber, the Invasion, you've got the what am I thinking of? There's one more I'm forgetting, but these are just it's such a great team.
Yeah.
And Jamie's been around since Patrick Troughton's second story, The Highlanders. So, and we actually get a little bit of a return at the end when Jamie and Zoe are restored back to their own times and places. You get to see the Jamie's brought back to where he hooked up with the Doctor in the Highlanders. Zoe is brought back to where she hooked up with the Doctor and Jamie in the Wheel in Space. So it obviously brings the Troughton era very full circle, and I'm curious to see what you think of it, Jesse.
So I really liked both of them as well. And one of the things I regret is a couple of years ago, Frazer Hines was at Comic Palooza, but I had not watched. This was before our podcast. I had not watched much Classic Who, and so I had no interest in meeting him. And now then, I'm kind of like, damn it, how did I miss that? I thought it, on a kind of similar note, it's kind of funny. He is in at least a couple episodes of Outlander.
Yeah. For that, why, of course.
Yeah, because
let you tell the story. Yeah.
Well, I was just going to say, because this is Outlander is essentially Doctor Who fan fiction rewritten as a novel series.
Yes.
And which is why the league, Highlander character is named
Jamie.
Jamie Frazer.
Yes.
It's not just a tribute to Jamie McCrimmon, it's a tribute to Frazer Hines. So, and which is one of the reasons they I'm sure, hey, if we're going to get anybody for this show, got to get Frazer Hines.
Yeah,
so,
he played Sir Fletcher Gordon, and I thought that was such wonderfully meta and everything. Mm-hmm. I like Jamie a lot. I think, one of the things I did is I watched the episode with the info text on, and they talked about him having to kind of come up with a TV Scottish accent, but I liked his passion. He wasn't an annoying like Roderick. Am I saying
Adric?
Adric. Yeah. And nothing against Adric fans. I'm just saying,
you'll be hard pressed to find any of them.
Yeah, he just seemed really good. I love that he's always in the kilt, and she was very attractive and very smart. And I'm sure that in Doctor Who fan fiction, they're getting it on in the TARDIS. Jamie and Zoe, I'm just saying, there seem to be...
There's all kinds of, fan fiction out there. It's not... I'm sure there's the Doctor and Jamie. There's the Doctor... There's the Doctor in the TARDIS. There's Jamie in the TARDIS. There's Zoe in the TARDIS. There's, you name it. It's out there.
So... so I really liked them, and I love the ending. I love that they, we've seen different people leave. Like Rose goes to the other dimension, and Donna gets her mind wiped because if she remembers, she'll die. Mm-hmm. And the Pawns going back because of the Weeping Angels. But this was a really nice completing the circle companion story.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the idea, I've had a lifetime with the Doctor, and not a true lifetime, but I've had my adventures, and now then we're going to bring it back right where they remember him, but they don't remember anything else. And I think that was pretty slick. I also love the fact that even back then, you know, the Doctor, the TARDIS has always taken him where he needs to go, not where he wants to go. And I love that about that. And yeah, I did want to mention when he was putting the cards on the floor, I was like, what the hell? And then when it made the box, I went, oh, look, it's the box. It's the box. It's the
hypercube. Yeah.
Yep.
And of course it isn't the Neil Gaiman box. I mean, you know,
No, it's the Malcolm Hulk and Terrence Dix box, because they came up with it. It's just, Neil Gaiman swiped it. So,
yes.
He homaged it. It's homage.
He nicked it.
So I'm going to get you guys' opinion on this, but one of the things as I'm talking about where you develop a taste for classic Who and your mind is set, you know, I don't know if you've gotten to hear our episode yet, Ken, that we recorded last. But I talked about Hartnell, you know.
The Dalek invasion of Earth.
Yeah.
Yes, I heard it.
Okay, you know, where you see in that first Doctor signs of 9, 10, 11, and 12. I mean, you see enough of it that you can tell.
Yes, absolutely.
And especially in this second Doctor, I see it as well.
Yep.
In fact, he was a little more playful and a little more impish and a little more sarcastic. And I really found myself going, I like him. I love that I don't know if you want to call his coat, pants, and coat jacket the utility belt of Doctor Who, or is there a miniature TARDIS in there that it's bigger in the inside?
The pockets are bigger in the inside.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's a reoccurring thing too, because Tom Baker pulled everything on Earth out of that jacket. Yep. So absolutely,
and I just kind of
so did Sylvester McCoy.
Yeah, and so did Sylvester McCoy. Quite right.
So once again, Ken, Charles, I want to know, what do you guys think of the second Doctor, and what's your opinion of why so many modern Doctors talk about their affection of him?
Well, because he's affectionate. It's easy. If you watch a lot of the first ones, especially initially, the first couple of seasons, William Hartnell is not a very likable guy. He is your grumpy grandpa. He's like all the worst things that, and Jesse will get this, that I try to portray in being just a grumpy, unapproachable person. He's basically grumpy and unapproachable, and he treats Ian bad. He treats Barbara worse. Or it's oftentimes when Parker and I would go, oh, hey, no, you don't talk to women like that. What's wrong with you? And
then he comes to accept them, though.
Yes, in the end, he like all of them, they evolve, and Hartnell evolves from the beginning and until his final one. He becomes much warmer and much more affectionate and much more accepting of them. Initially, he's like, yeah, humans, ugh. And then by the end, he's really liking them. He respects them, their ability to overcome. This Doctor starts at that point and gets even more likable. He's fun. He's enjoyable. You can poke fun at him and he doesn't, Jamie's always ribbing him about the fact that the TARDIS doesn't work. I mean, in this episode, the warlord comes into the thing and Jamie's like, oh, I don't know why you're asking him. It never goes anywhere where you wanted to go. But he's a likable guy. And I think that as the new actors come in to play the Doctor, they want to absorb at least a part of that to make him likable. Capaldi's been the first one in a long time who I think has pushed back a little bit on that and said, yeah, I'm not everybody's pal. I'm not, the great friendly guy from space. And that's one of the things I really appreciate about him. And so I think that's why everybody likes him, because he's likable.
Okay. Charles?
Matt Smith has gone on record as saying that Troughton's Doctor was the one that influenced him the most in his portrayal of the 11th Doctor. You can see it. Just the fact the childlike quality, but then you've got the learned man that's eons old at the same time. Like it's that nice little juxtaposition that that makes the Doctor so engaging and likable, as Ken said, and fun to watch. I mean, and unpredictable. You can't really predict what Troughton's Doctor is going to do. Which is one of the great things about him. Just when you think he's going to zig, he zags like completely the opposite way. So, and Matt Smith's Doctor is pretty much like that. Yep. I know that Capaldi, he stated that he's been influenced by the first 4 Doctors, which is why, he's got a lot of the Hartnell and early Tom Baker standoffishness incorporated in his Doctor,
even down to holding the collars. I just love that. Capaldi adopted Hartnell's lapel grabbing, which is just fantastic, and he's got a lot of like almost Pertwee type mannerisms. So there is it's a nice little blend, and I think it's just that with Troughton's Doctor. He was the first one. I mean, his was the most important role because after William Hartnell left, he had to reinvent the role of the Doctor. He had to just completely make it his own and prove to everybody that, hey, okay, I'm not going to be exactly like William Hartnell, but I'm going to be a Doctor you can appreciate just as much. And I think he kind of showed the later Doctors how you could approach the role differently without copying or exactly what was done before, and make it your own.
And I really do think, and this is common knowledge, but talk about a lot of pressure, and probably they have no idea this thing's going to last 50 years, but just the idea that here you are is really wonderful. And I agree with him. I really liked him. I thought he was charming. I thought he was interesting. And so I was really, really happy to kind of get to know him. And it was a lot of fun. So, I'm kind of throwing a curve. How do you guys rank him in your, Doctors?
Oh, see, you are. That's throwing me a curve. Now I got to stop and think about it. Obviously, Baker is number 1 for me because he's my first. And I think Tennant is probably number 2 just because I really appreciate everything that he brought, and then so many of his episodes are so great. But I have to admit, I think I would probably put Troughton as 3 or 4 because I'm liking number 3 a lot right now too. We're enjoying him a great deal, and there's a lot of Capaldi has a lot of number 3 in him as well. So even down to the dress, of course. So the obvious, he's definitely in my top 4.
Oh, very interesting. Charles, how about you?
Yeah, I would agree as well as that top 4 assessment. Davison's my Doctor. Always will be, because I started with like the last 2 Tom Baker episodes, but the Davison run was the first one I completed after that. So he kind of essentially was my main Doctor. Tom Baker's up there huge. I'm a big Matt Smith fan. David Tennant. So it's I say Troughton's at least top 4, top 5 for me as well.
Yeah, and I really haven't seen enough of the classic episodes to make that call. Mm-hmm. But as I've talked to you about this, and and I keep repeating it, but the truth is, as you watch these episodes, you kind of go, well, I'd like to see another one. I'd like to see.
Hey, what a concept!
Yeah.
I like this episode. Let's watch more. What a great idea!
Hey, Charles, it's working.
Yes,
Oh,
absolutely.
excellent.
Yes,
excellent.
Yeah.
All part of the plan.
Now, between the two of you, maybe you guys can tell. I understood a little bit of why this story kind of wandered. Wandered. And that's a kind way, right?
Basically it's 6 episodes too long, this story.
Because it was supposed to be 6 and they made it 10.
Yep.
And so and for various reasons that are behind the scenes, and maybe you two can share that. But I think that I think you could say this on almost any of the classic Who's, that it could stand a good editing.
Yeah.
But I think also, though, if we tried to watch them, 30 minutes, because it's 25, because when they sold it foreign, they had to give time for, commercials.
Yep.
I think if you watched it once a week, you may understand the pacing a little bit more versus where we're watching them in a row. So I'm kind of combining a couple of our agendas, like on if you guys can share why it got pushed back, if you guys know that story. And do you think that, it starts out with this war story and the Doctor's involved, and it ends up giving us this major reveal of the Doctor's backstory. Did that work for you, or would you have preferred it kind of been two different stories, that we'd had a reveal story and then we'd had just an adventure? And Ken?
I can definitely see how it could have been two stories, and that probably would have worked really well. In fact, I can kind of see in my mind, and Charles is the writer, so he can probably really see it in his mind, where you would take the script and where you would splice it, and you could put it where you could cut it, and where you could put a good cliffhanger and go, that's this story. So we get all of the war stuff, all the different lands and those weird guys with the glasses, and you deal with all of that, and then you cut it, and then you deal with all the stuff on whatever planet the warlord is from, and where all that takes place as a second episode, and those two could probably stand on their own. On the other hand, this flows amazingly well for as cobbled together as Wikipedia says it is. It actually flows really well. If you just tightened it up a bunch, and made a lot of the war scenes and driving around and through the smoke and everything, and probably chop the Romans out altogether, you could probably get it down to 6, and it probably would be a really tight story. But, it has its charm, even if it takes you 2 weeks like it did Parker and I to get through it. It's just like, yikes, this is still going on. Oh, my God. What do you think, Charles?
I think that's probably pretty dead on. I probably would have cut it. If I was going to cut it, I'd cut it with a cliffhanger, with the Doctor sending the message to the Time Lords, and then pick up from that moment where you kind of get like the Doctor, starting to escape, get captured, and then you can have a whole thing with the Time Lords on Gallifrey, a little bit more extended. Basically, you take that whole that kind of second half of episode 9 with the entire episode 10 and just flesh that out a little more and make it that a story. But generally, I agree. I think this story works better pretty much because it's combined. It's one of those that's like you've got the war story, you've got a resolution, and just when you think everything's all nice and tidy, there's a complete curve thrown at the audience. And I think that's kind of why this ending works really well, because it's like, I'm sure the audiences in 1969, I mean, you didn't get much from like the Radio Times, which was the local TV guide of the day. So it wasn't like you had the internet going, spoiling everything for you.
Yeah, you had two sentences.
So they must have been like, holy crap, the Doctor's going to get he's caught now by his own people, and we get to find out about them, and how great is this? So it's a huge bombshell, and especially when in episode 10 when you get the whole thing with the regeneration and everything. So the only thing they knew was coming was probably the newspaper announcements that Patrick Troughton was leaving. They didn't know how he was going to leave, and so when this story came out, I think that it probably really surprised a lot of people, and as a result, I think the story works better that way.
Yeah, I don't want to do old man syndrome, but there is
we all are.
Yes, but there is a beauty to not being spoiled.
Yeah.
And
I remember the day of internet spoilers.
Yeah.
Oh, do you know how hard it is to keep from that? Because I don't watch live television, even Doctor Who. I wait for the discs to come out. Trying to keep away from spoilers in today's world is mind-numbingly hard. Mm-hmm. You almost have to cut yourself off. I unfollow people for a period of time. it's crazy hard. So yeah, I feel what you're saying, Jess.
Yeah, and because we've talked about this when I wasn't spoiled on Paul McGann's appearance for the 50th anniversary, and it was so much joy when you hear his voice. I'm a doctor, maybe not the one you're expecting, and so I think about this, if you're someone watching Doctor Who back in the 69, and I would have been 10, and let's say I was a Doctor fan, I
have something to add to that, but I'll wait till you finish your point.
I would have been like, oh my gosh, they're telling this backstory, and one of the information text I thought was really interesting is that up until this point, they had never had an official backstory. And so Hartnell and Susan Ford believed that they had escaped in the TARDIS when their own planet was being destroyed, the Superman origin. That's, and David Tosh, who was a story editor, thought that he was a non-human and he took a human form because he was obsessed with them and wanted to study. And, and I thought both of those were fascinating. And you wonder about the discussion. Are we going to give this? Are we going to put down? Is this the right time? And no pun intended. It's just fascinating. And I agree with you guys, except for the normal pacing that 60s television gives. The show I did never feel like I had, a wrench neck. Like, what happened? They took me along on the journey and kind of kept going. Mm-hmm. I was a little confused on, and see, I'm still confused. I got to look at my notes. The War Chief and the Warlord.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
The War Chief keeps saying that, well, the Warlord, and I thought you are the Warlord, but it was so
the Warlord was the head of the planet. It was his plan to take over the galaxy. The War Chief is actually the renegade Time Lord that was giving them technology and stuff. And why he took a subservient role like that, I'm not sure either.
Oh. And maybe he was just using them. Like, I'll just pretend to be the number 2 and manipulate things behind the scenes.
Yeah, because at one point, Parker and I wondered if this was like the Master. Because he kind of acts like the Master, and he's a renegade. He's got machinations where he's trying to take over the universe and stuff. And
he's kind of like a prototype Master.
Yeah, he's a prototype Master who obviously everybody liked well enough that later on they create the Master sort of in his image.
But the B. McBeard.
Yeah.
They did. Yes.
Got that evil goatee thing.
Evil.
Yes.
So, because of the way you guys watch this, the idea that there are Time Lords and that the Doctor is from Gallifrey, even though, as Charles mentioned, it isn't named, this isn't a surprise reveal for you. But how do you think they did in giving you enough that you've got a little bit of information, but not beating you down with, too much information? They kept it, because if you explain exactly how a sonic screwdriver works, it's kind of like someone said a long time ago, if you tell what Captain America's shield is made out of, then something could, if it's actually a material, even a made-up material, then someone can make up a material that can hurt it, dent it. But if you don't ever say what it's made for, therefore it's easier to have the dispel, you can't hurt Captain America's shield. So as I mix my metaphors, if you don't give the Doctor's background, you have a lot more story. So how do you think they balance that? Because I will tell you, I thought it was pretty good. I was like, okay, they've kind of told enough. They've kept it kind of vague. They kind of have, in that Superman theme, they kind of look like Krypton, uniforms. Not the classic Kurt Swan Krypton, but, like Marlon Brando kind of Krypton, the robes.
Oh, wait till you see the later Gallifreyan,
Yeah.
so they get the stupid headdresses. You'll love that.
They seemed.
I like the headdresses.
Do you like those head
Yeah,
things?
I do.
It looks like Galactus. It's got
that's what's awesome about it. It's cool.
They seem to, I know he's saying that they're a bunch of stuck-up people, but I think they seemed a little bit. They seemed nice enough to me in this episode. They let the doctor say goodbye, and then he immediately tries to cheat them. Well, okay, let's escape. They put the companions back. So I
think he was more indulging Jamie and Zoe at that point.
Okay, you think so?
Because they wanted him to escape, and he was because he was more resigned at first.
He was pretty resigned, yeah.
Yeah,
exactly.
So it's like, okay, he's like, okay, we'll escape. Go ahead, let's go. Even though probably in his head he's like, "There's no way we're getting out."
There's no way.
It's not happening.
Not happening.
Very nice.
But yes, you're right that the Gallifreyans in this, the other Time Lords, are pretty nice. They can be pretty grumpy in the years that come. But I think, like many historians, we are coloring what we see by where we are now. The fact of the matter is that the writers of this stuff are pulling this all out of whole cloth. And they really don't, they're not like J. Michael Straczynski and have the arc all in their mind already. They're kind of making it up on the fly, especially at this stage. And so it's not that they were very careful in their not revealing too much. They were just, okay, what can we make up that will make this story interesting? And they didn't go any further because there's no place further to go. Only now, through the course of time, do we see that we need to have a whole lot more backstory. We hear, yes, I stole the TARDIS, but we still don't know why he stole the TARDIS or how he stole the TARDIS. And while I'm on that subject, really quick, does anybody else besides me think that the Sidrats are what a TARDIS looks like when its chameleon circuit isn't broken? Because that was immediate. That was Parker's immediate thought was that's what a TARDIS looks like when it's.
Well, if you look at the name of the Doctor, where you've got Clara, going back to when the first Doctor takes the TARDIS, and she's like, no, take this one. They look a lot like the Sidrats.
They look like those Sidrats. Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
But this story, the War Games, this does actually address one of the mysteries that was introduced in the series' first episode. Because you had the first Doctor, and Susan, like when Ian and Barbara first enter the TARDIS, and the Doctor is kind of getting on their case, and he's like, do you know what it's like to be travelers in the fourth dimension, to be exiles? So right there, he establishes that he and Susan are exiles from where we don't know. But that whole exile thing, that they were on the run.
Band on the run.
Yeah, exactly. So right here, this kind of addresses that whole fugitive status.
Yeah.
And kind of closes that thread.
Yeah, one of the things I thought the same thing while I'm watching this, Ken, is going, because in fact, I reached out after the Doctor's wife to Charles, and I said by email, hey, what does a TARDIS look like when it's not being, under? And he goes, well, we really don't know, I'm like, because I was curious, and you had the console, and they kind of did that. So I think that is what it kind of looks like. Can you guys explain to me what's the difference besides it's the word spelled backwards? What's the difference between a Sidrat and a TARDIS?
The Sidrat was for moving lots of stuff. It's the transport plane.
It's a U-Haul.
Oh, yeah, it's the U-Haul of dimensional travel, whereas a TARDIS is more of a personal thing. Okay. Although that whole concept really doesn't, in the final analysis, make a lot of sense, since if you can make the inside of that thing anything that you want, because the inside dimension isn't the same as the outside dimension, then any of them could be a transport of anything. You could make the inside of the TARDIS the size of a planet if you wanted to, I suppose, if you had the energy. But yeah, it's they said at some point, or maybe I read it on Wikipedia, that it was for transporting.
Yeah.
Okay.
The war chief does point out that the Sid Rats they weren't intended as a permanent device. They're breaking down, which is why they can't get everybody eventually, you know, like when he finally flips and says, okay, yeah, I'm with you guys, but we can't get everybody home because these Sid Rats are falling apart on us.
Yeah.
This is why I needed your TARDIS.
Mm-hmm.
So it's almost like the Sid Rats are like a low budget TARDIS.
Okay.
Yeah, they're powered differently because he makes a comment about, you figured out a way to make it so that they could be, it was something having to do with power, and I don't remember specifically, but so whereas the TARDISes have this mystical link with the eye of
Harmony.
Yeah, the eye of harmony, the power of the thing forever. So
it's almost like the Sid Rats have like a really crappy battery life.
Yes, exactly.
And they run out of juice really quickly, and they die on you all the time.
They were the TARDIS one.
They're low rent.
Yes.
They're the Hyundais of
they're low shelf. They're the low shelf. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Because that came to mind.
They're the Ford Pinto of time.
BBC America was re-showing some episodes, and I rewatched Mummy on the Orient Express, and a great episode. And at the end, when Clara wakes up, you have the wonderful, I saved everyone. I put them in the TARDIS, and I put them all back, or I just saved you and they all died, whichever you want to believe, and it's so that, you're like, he is joking, right? But, so good. That makes a lot of sense to me. So as I continue down our little thoughts, anything else of the episode we need to talk before we get to favorite lines and rating it?
I don't think so.
We've talked for an hour and really not talked any specific plot points.
I know.
But it really, I think, the story...
Watch the story. Watch the episode yourselves, damn it.
Yes.
Yeah.
we put in the time.
Now, Jesse, what did you think about the when the doctor's on trial? And he's kind of like arguing about, or he's making his defense, like saying, look, there's evil out there. I'm out there fighting it. You guys are sitting on your ass doing nothing. So, and then he shows up he throws up a thought channel and throws up the Quarks and the Yeti and the Ice Warriors and the Cybermen and the Daleks, and he's like, look at all these guys I'm fighting, and you're doing nothing. So
it really was a great, from my core, Kirk explaining why, the
private director
must die.
And I did think of and I'm going to get the quote wrong, but for evil to flourish, all you need are good men to do nothing.
Nothing. That's correct.
And I think he was calling him out on it. And I thought it was good to show the villains, the different monsters. I thought it was really good. I thought it was a nice kind of companion to in the second episode when they have the trial that's done with the glasses. By the way, which was a really nice point that when the German or the British guy,
has his glasses,
Smythe, when putting on the glasses means mind control, taking him off, you just think normal. In that trial, they didn't even let him. That was a funny scene. But you can't ask that question. Wait a minute. So I was really happy with it, and I think in a lot of ways, and I do think this is from my perspective, based on what I've seen, it was a just punishment. Even though their laws may be bad laws, they're still laws. Yeah. And so by them saying, we're going to make you regenerate so they won't recognize you. We're going to put you on Earth since you seem to be in love with that, and you can fight the good fight there.
We need a new actor.
Yes,
that's right.
We need a new actor, and we're trying to cut money.
That's right. Exactly right.
Yes. But so I thought that was a pretty good. I liked the trial, and it was, it's funny because one of the other things that Ken gave me when I was going to interview Colin Baker, name dropping, that he gave me the Time of the Trial Lord, and I got to watch that. Was a different type of trial, and it was interesting. This one I thought was pretty cool. You didn't get to see much of the planet, nor did you get to see a lot of the fellow Time Lords. And I still have this, just because you're not all Time Lords are Gallifreyans, but not all Gallifreyans are Time Lords, right?
Or Time Lords.
Right.
We assume. I'm thinking that basically being a Time Lord is like a degree.
Yes.
It's like you go to college and you graduate and you're a Time Lord.
Yeah.
But even that, there's variances within being a Time Lord, because the Ronnie is a Time Lord, but she's a biologist.
Yeah.
So there's like minors with the major of Time Lordiness, I guess. And so, but then the Gallifreyans, just the people, they're not necessarily Time Lords.
Right. And I guess
his wife wasn't. Now, does regeneration, is that a Gallifreyan thing or a Time Lord thing?
Yeah.
And how does going to school and learning give you the ability to regenerate?
And you almost think that's a Gallifreyan thing, because he talks about my race has made it where we're almost immortal.
Right.
But we're not doing anything with that. So, yeah.
And yet the war chief just dies.
Yeah.
He gets shot and killed, and he doesn't regenerate.
He doesn't regenerate. So maybe that gun's really bad. You would think
it was a Time Lord gun. Yeah, that's it.
That's the ticket.
And I did enjoy the war chief and the doctor talking about, we're going to bring peace to the galaxy. We're going to use these humans. Humans like to shoot each other anyway. So, they would have either they would have killed themselves doing something else. And it was just really, once again, a pretty modern debate for something that, 40, 50 years ago.
Yes. And we're still debating that basic, does the end justify the means?
Yeah.
Even still today. And that debate will go on for forever, because I think Socrates was probably talking to his students about that. So there you go.
Yeah. And
it's essentially good science fiction, because you've got approaching those themes from an alien perspective.
Yep.
Yeah.
What Star Trek did the original series did so very well to popularize, to take modern questions, modern issues, put them in a science fiction setting so that it's less, what do they call it today?
Intimidating.
There's a phrase, not like hot buttons, but trigger warnings. It's not so trigger warning that we're going to talk about interracial marriage or whatever it is, because we're going to put it in this other setting so it won't be so upsetting to the sensitive.
Yeah, I thought it was really interesting. And the other thing I wanted to cover is, I guess I love that even back to then, because one of the info texts was, "Oh my word," was one of the second Doctor's catchphrases.
Yeah.
And I love the fact that each kind of Doctor has had, this phrase, and running has always been part of being a Doctor and a companion.
There's always a lot of running.
You're like, first thing you pick if you're going to be a companion is really good shoes.
Yes. What is it in Zombieland? Number one, cardio.
Yes.
Well, this is why the Fifth Doctor introduced the idea of tennis shoes.
Yes, absolutely. Like, I'm going to do all this anyway. Yeah.
Yep. He was younger. He was going to do a lot of running. So that's why he's got tennis shoes on.
Is there running in cricket? Because he really loved that game.
Yes.
So. Yep.
Favorite lines.
You want me to start, or you go ahead, Ken?
I'm afraid you guys will steal mine, because I only really have one that just really stood out, and Jesse's already kind of talked about it. The Doctor's defense in the trial is as good a speech as standing in front of the God yelling at him and in front of the
you can't handle the truth.
Yeah, exactly. All these evils I have fought, while you have done nothing but observe. True, I am guilty of interference. just as you are guilty of failing to use your great power to help those in need. It's the kind of statement you just want to stand up and go, yeah. And
then the doctor drops the mic.
Exactly. Yeah.
And it does get him out of a death sentence because actually the sentence should have had was death. So it's a good speech.
It is a really good speech. Good.
But now I've stolen the good one, and you guys are going to have to struggle.
No. We have a couple.
I've got one lined up.
Okay, go ahead.
All right. Mine was this exchange between the Doctor and Jamie. Where the Doctor says, "Well, it is a fact, Jamie, that I do tend to get involved with things." And Jamie responds, you can say that again. Whenever there's any trouble, he's right in it up to his neck. I love that.
So that was one of mine.
Perfectly defined the second Doctor and Jamie's relationship.
Yes.
Yep.
So I love that.
So I love the end where he says, "You can't just change what I look like without consulting me." And then they show him the whole pictures and
those cartoons. Don't you love those cartoons?
This one's too fat and this one's too thin.
Yes.
It's like this terrible picture.
What a horrible bunch.
Yes, it was. The only thing it would have been nice if he could have said, "I want to be ginger." But we have to wait for later. So, ratings.
I give it a 9. It's 9 screw-driving sonic screwdrivers.
Nice.
I give this one 8.5 out of 10 hypercubes.
We
don't get to see them again, and I never get to use them much. So I'm going to choose hypercubes.
I gave it 8.5 Sid Rats. I really like this one, and I kind of agree with you guys. The charm of it, even though it's so long, it gives you a really good story and a good journey. So really good stuff, and I really love it. And Ken, thank you for suggesting it.
Oh, well, you're welcome. It really impressed Parker and I, and so that's kind of why I kind of pushed for it, because it was like, wow, this is something. We're seeing the departure of companions and the sonic screwdriver, and wow.
Yeah. This one was actually this was one I wanted to cover, but I was afraid to bring it up to Jesse because he'd be like, 10 episodes? Are you kidding me?
Are you crazy? Yeah. Together we can
get out of here.
And if we had done this first, once again, we made a joke yesterday or day before. Charles, we did the little thing back and forth in Twitter, and I think it was email, and I said, okay, you're right, and he goes, the sooner you accept that,
the better off life. Isn't the easier you accept that, life gets, isn't it?
So, Charles is starting to sound like Gina, Jesse. What
just a little bit. I love the fact. I mean, I think you have really done a great job of picking which episodes and in what order, by starting with the Third Doctor and the Spearhead from Space. That is in a lot of ways, when we look at, the first Ninth Doctor, right? It is just a lot of good stuff.
I just think that as an entry point to classic Who, I think Spearhead from Space is a great entry point.
Yeah,
it is indeed.
And so that's why I kind of skipped the first couple Doctors. I'm glad we got to go back, and do a couple of their stories before moving on, because I wanted this is now you've tasted all the Doctors.
Yes,
you selected every chocolate in the box.
Yes, and I did not find any that I didn't like.
Oh, good.
Yeah. So, do you have a reverse the polarity reversed?
Yeah, I figured. I was wondering if you were going to have one, but because it would be a modern story. But but I went with the End of Time.
Okay.
By Russell T Davies, and the reason I went with this one because you've got the 10th Doctor running from a prophecy about his own demise, so he's kind of like on the run. You had the Sixth Master using people on Earth as part of some really elaborate scheme. So that's kind of fits in with the War Games. You've got the Time Lords coming back, so you've got the Time Lords introduced, and you've got at the end of the story, you've got the Doctor saying goodbye to his companions and regenerating. So thematically, I think it's kind of similar in the ballpark.
I would not have picked that, but it absolutely is. And one of the things I did not connect that, but one of the things I loved when the little kind of almost after, the little where David Tennant goes and sees all these companions, is just so satisfying. And so I'm glad you brought that up. Great. Absolutely. Good. So I think we've got a little bit of time. Yeah. Charles says let's worry about time.
An hour? That's it?
Yeah. So
Whips.
As we're recording this, it is the Sunday of the San Diego Comic-Con. There's been a little bit of Doctor Who news that it's come out.
Just a little.
Yeah.
Yeah, just a wee bit. We have a trailer for Series 9 at last. This hit
trailer it was.
This hit Thursday. We've got the premiere date was announced, which is now, what is it here? It's going to be scrolling. September 19th. Yes.
September 19th, yeah.
Yeah, so September 19th back on BBC America for Series 9.
So, and I'm going to stop you there. Much like the famous decision that ABC worked out with the creators of Lost, now that we know when this hiatus is ending, it will be easier for Charles and I to work out our schedule so that we'll be ready to go. We'll have to do a preseason episode, and I'm telling right now, I would love for everyone we've had on this thing, this massive 6 or 8 people.
So basically you want the Next Stop Everywhere version of the Stolen Earth and Journey's End.
Yes.
Where you've got everyone. You've got all the companions on board the TARDIS.
Yes, talking about the new season. So, yes. So what else did we hear? By the way, I love the trailer so much. That's what our email was about. I'm like, let's do a special episode just talking the trailer. And he's like...
Yeah, I'm like, I got to talk Jesse down. I'm like, dude, it's only a 90-second trailer. There's not a lot to talk about.
Oh,
not to hype another podcast, but that really is sort of the bailiwick of the 2-minute Time Lord.
Yes.
He a 2-minute thing on a 90-second thing, that'll be perfect.
Yes, absolutely.
But so 90-second on like a 1 hour plus show.
Right.
Yeah, it's a little stretching. Even by classic Doctor Who standards, that's padding.
Okay.
So, but this trailer was cool because we obviously get to see the return of Michelle Gomez as Missy, the mistress, the master, take your pick. The Daleks, of course, make an appearance because they're contractually obligated to use them at least once a year. Otherwise, they lose the rights unofficially. But officially, that's probably the reason. The Zygons are finally back.
Yes.
We got to see them in the Day of the Doctor in the 50th anniversary. And before that, we hadn't seen them since their first appearance in Terror of the Zygons back during the 4th Doctor era. So it's kind of nice to get a little bit more of the Zygons. And I'm wondering if that's going to be the story where Osgood is featured.
We hope. We have heard that actress is...
So is the Osgood the Zygon Osgood?
That is the current...
Was the Zygon Osgood the one that was killed by Missy?
I don't know. We'll see. I love that actress.
Or is this a pre-Missy death Osgood? We don't know.
Yeah, I love that actress, and so I'm happy with any reason. I've heard other people go, "Oh no, you're taking away death." I'm like, I just love the actress so much. Any excuse to get her back on the Doctor is fine with me.
On the Doctor, hey now.
Yeah, hey, okay.
Hey now. Yeah. We get to see Clara wearing the very familiar orange jumpsuit or astronaut suit.
Yes.
Space again. We've got the Doctor donning some Ray-Bans and breaking out an electric guitar.
Yes.
Showing Peter Capaldi's like classic little music roots.
Yes.
So he gets to showcase a little bit of that, making his Doctor a little bit more hip in the process, and I kind of like that.
Absolutely.
But the big thing,
the elephant in the room.
the big like WTF moment in this trailer is Maisie Williams from Game of Thrones turning up at the end. Arya Stark as apparently as a highwayman, and she takes off her mask. And she kind of looks at the doctor, seemingly knowing him, going, "What took you so long, old man?" And, where the doctor kind of looks at her and then he's like, "You."
Yes.
So, he knows her somehow. Yeah. Now, is it just someone he met previously in the episode, or is it someone from his past?
Oh, it's someone from his past. Yeah. I am utterly and completely in the Susan camp.
Yeah, I'm hoping it. I would love it for it to be the doctor's granddaughter, Susan.
It's got that's the biggest hanging thread ever.
But this is Moffat. He would kind of like to just yank that little kind of set people up only to knock them over.
That's it.
But here's the thing: is it Susan or is it maybe Jenny from the doctor's daughter?
Yes.
Regenerated, or is it Romana? Is she back, or someone else entirely?
Yes. There was a really nice write-up.
I'm hoping for Susan.
Yeah, I hope for Susan too. And I don't know if you have not taken the time to watch the Doctor Who panel. It's online. It's really well done. It's funny, and one of the things they ask Peter Capaldi, what previous companion would you want to work with? And they make a big deal because Jenna Coleman's right there, and hey,
that's your ex.
And he says,
right here, hello.
Yeah, and he's like, I'd love to see my granddaughter again. And Chris Hardwick, which is government mandated that he has to do at least a couple of panels, said perfect answer.
So Chris Hardwick is a Dalek? Really? What?
Where he says perfect answer. No one can ever be unhappy you giving that answer. So
very diplomatic.
Yes, and so I think I agree with you guys. I think that would be great for Susan, and to see.
I hope this means Carol Ann Ford returns as well. Hopefully, we get a regeneration or something.
Wouldn't
that be great?
That would be interesting. I'm not sure how you'd pull that off.
But
is she still alive?
Yes, she's
the
still
Susan
alive.
Actress. Yeah,
she's in her 70s. She's in her 70s, but she's perfectly willing to come back. And she's come back on Big Finish Audio in Eighth Doctor Audio Adventures, where she finally got to meet up with her grandfather.
And I do think, and I'm gonna
and those count now thanks to Titus the Doctor. So Big Finish counts.
I'm gonna do kind of a stretch here, but hang with me. One of the complaints that sports fans that live in Dallas, who are Dallas Cowboy fans, complain that Jerry Jones doesn't seem to want to recognize or honor the people who played in the team before his ownership. So there are very few of these classic Cowboy players are in our Ring of Honor. And a little bit, I think the modern BBC seem to not want to go to that well. And I realize it would be difficult because they look different in the age. And absolutely, it was wonderful seeing Baker in the 50th anniversary. But when you have these Frazer Hines, Susan Ford, I was so sad that the Brigadier, died. Now I know he did. He did some of the Sarah Jane Smith episodes, so he did it back. But it seems a shame them not to have them somehow. Now that I understand you wouldn't want to go that well too soon, but now that the show's established, at least some kind of role to throw there in there. At least that's the sentimental, gushy chocolate center part of Jesse.
Well, and they do that. They do that with some. Like, for instance, in this episode that we watched tonight, Patrick Troughton's son has a very small bit part. he's played like 5 different. If you look at his IMDb, he's got like 5 different things, including in the modern series.
And Michael Troughton, his other son, was just in the Christmas special, this past Christmas special.
Oh, that's right.
Last Christmas.
So they do that to some degree. I don't know.
I would love to see Sean Pertwee portray the Third Doctor.
Yeah, that would be interesting.
Wouldn't that be fantastic? Because he has the look. We've seen him like in costume. He can pull off the look, and he's got his father's
the accent,
gravelly voice. So
yeah.
How fantastic would it be to have him reprise that?
Wasn't there a picture from Comic-Con with Capaldi and Patrick together? They had ran into each other and tweeted. I thought it was someone.
No, I haven't seen.
I did not see that.
Okay, if I find it, I'll retweet it.
It might be out there, but I haven't seen it yet.
Okay, good deal. So well, great. So we have September 19th. Mm-hmm. If I was Sheldon Cooper, I could tell that how many weeks that is immediately, but I'm not. So, but it is. It's getting soon. Right. So we're very, very excited.
It's 9, by the way. No.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sheldon.
Ken Schaefer, this has been a joy. It is. I almost have tears in my eyes having my 2 Who grandfathers, my brother-in-law.
Who fathers?
Yes, my Who fathers together at one time. I hope you had fun talking with us.
Yeah, this was great. I hope I didn't ruin your podcast.
No. You were great.
Yeah.
I think we're going to get rid of Jesse now and keep you. I don't know.
I don't think that. No.
I'm just teasing Jesse. I'm kidding.
Yeah.
Never replace you. You're irreplaceable.
So,
he, on the other hand, that's a different story.
I don't think so.
Ken, do you want to share how anyone can find you if they want to give you nice compliments?
Well, there's not nearly as many as Charles and you. I do have a Twitter handle. I am Dirkmaster on the Twitter, and I think it's Dirkmaster on G+ as well. Although I don't remember actually, because I tend to lurk more than participate. My days of participation in social media stuff was back in the Bix and Genie days, and I tend to lurk in the peanut gallery more now than I did. So
to pull back the curtain a little bit, I actually had to kind of prod Ken to join us because he was originally going to be on when we talked the TV movie, and he said, "Oh, y'all don't need me. You and Charles are fine." And so I said, "Look, I want you to talk an episode," and so I kind of browbeat him, and I'm so glad he did. Back in the day, Ken used to do a blog on all the bad movies he watched, and it was always fun.
There is. It's still out there on somewhere. I would write up, because I watch a movie every night, and they're by and large bad, and because that's what I do. I'm the bad movie king. So that's why I was thrilled to hear that Chuck liked Mystery Science Theater, because that's sure where I got my start back in the Comedy Central Mystery Science Theater days. So.
Ken, I hear you appreciate the fact that I have the Riff Tracks version of the Peter Cushing Doctor Who movies.
That is the only reason to.
Those are the ones I watch. I can't watch those Cushing movies straight. I have to watch them. I have to watch the Riff Tracks version.
I remember seeing the first one, the Peter Cushing one, on like TNT or Turner Classic Movies, and this would have been in the 80s, because I was still in the Navy in Charleston in South Carolina, and I remember watching it going, what? What the hell? Why?
Where's the theme? Where's the TARDIS sound effects? What
do you mean he's a human? Why is there laundry hanging inside the TARDIS? What is this?
Why is Ian such a douche?
Yes. Such a douche.
Yes. So thank you. And Charles, where can we find you?
Obviously, you can find me at Charles Skaggs on Twitter, or at Charles Skaggs on Instagram. I'm also on the Google Plus for all you crazy kids on the Google Plus. Shout out to Karen. And You can find me on my blog of geeky things, Damn Good Coffee and Hot.
I want to
Doctor Who, all the stuff that's going on in San Diego Comic-Con, comics, sci-fi, you name it. I try to cover it as fast as I can, as time allows, as podcasts allow.
Yes.
In some cases, this has been a very busy weekend for me. So hopefully this will get caught up.
Yeah, there was a lot of posts, and you and Karen haven't talked about the Jay Garrick casting yet, right?
Not yet.
Okay, so that's next.
That came out after we recorded.
Okay, so next weekend when I'm supposed to record with you, I'm so excited about talking about that.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because next week here on Next Stop Everywhere, we're going to be covering A Town Called Mercy at Karen Lindsay's request. Because it features a certain Farscape actor by the name of Ben Browder.
Yes.
And this would be, I guess, the second part of Karen's plan for a Ben Browder-a-thon.
Yes.
Because she wants to cover on the Fandom Zone podcast, she wants to cover the Arrow episode Suicide Squad, which also featured Ben Browder.
Very nice.
So that's part one, and the Next Stop Everywhere with Town Called Mercy is part two. And
awesome.
Jesse, of course, is presumably going to be joining us on the Phantom Zone podcast. So
absolutely.
So hope you check that out for part one as we do this Ben Browder crossover-a-thon.
Absolutely. And I can be found on Twitter at Jesse Jackson DFW. That's right. I have changed my Twitter handle.
What? You hiding from me?
No. I decided that as I'm pursuing employment, and also because at different times people have tried to find me on Twitter, the JWJ170104 a little difficult. So Jesse Jackson DFW a little easier. But I think the way Twitter works, you can do both. And I am doing a Halt and Catch Fire podcast here on SMG, and it was good. And just to show you, I don't forget my roots. Last Monday, we recorded, and they'll be dropping it soon. We talked best albums of the 80s, and I resisted the urge that we could pick three. Bruce Springsteen put out 4 albums in the 80s. I did not pick all Bruce Springsteen albums. I picked one, though. So it was a lot of fun to discuss.
Was Brian Wilson one of the others?
Yes, it was. You know me very well.
Yeah, you could say that.
Yes, we do.
So therefore, you didn't go through withdrawal by not mentioning Bruce Springsteen.
Exactly, yes.
I need my Springsteen fix, man. Give me my Springsteen fix.
We do have some other, we have Wendy Hembrook from Tuning Into Sci-Fi TV is going to join us. We have Heidi from Castlecast is going to pick, she wants to do Blink, and we've never done Blink, so that would be fun. So we have a lot. We're looking forward to that. And so for now, we're going to say keep hope alive. And I'm a Time Lord, a man of science, temperament, and passion. And Perry says in a loud voice. Thanks, guys. We will talk to you next week. For now, go to iTunes, like us, rate us, and share the word. For now, see you later. Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.